Ginger, and we are just going to be telling you about our robot from this past year. So it'll be pretty informal, so if you have any questions at any point about anything I talk about, feel free to interject, or you can raise your hand or whatever feels most comfortable with you.
So my name is Adam. I was code lead last year. I just graduated, and then I'm going to go to university.
My name is Ginger. I sort of led mechanical last year. I was also a captain, and I will be going to Harvey-led college. And we were both seniors last year, so now we're mentors. So in this talk, we're going to be going through all of the main assemblies on our robot, and I'll be first talking about the mechanical components, and then Adam will be going over what sensors we used and what general control loops we have. Show of hands, here is more like a mechanical person who's interested in what's happening mechanically. Software, who wants to know all of our control loops? Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Okay, so drivetrain, intake, hanger, which are sort of connected, and then gear mechanism, shooter, and the serializer / indexer, which is our first. Okay, so starting with our drivetrain, which is a little hard to see on the robot, but we called it a 2+2 this year because it had 2 axles. So we basically stacked 3 Coulson wheels, so it was like this thick of just Coulson wheels, which are essentially like rubbery traction wheels in the back. And then we just had 1 Omni wheel in front. It was a 2+2 because front to the back, right? And it was like, do you guys know what Omni wheels are? How they spin one way and then the other way, they just sort of move freely. And so the idea is with the 2 traction wheels in the back, we were like, you know, you can imagine like a robot that like, yeah, it was supposed to allow us to be more maneuverable, essentially. Go to the next slide. So, a few things. You guys see all those holes on the drivetrain there? In the belly pan on the far CAD, you see the holes that are in a circle? So, part of the design restriction on the drivetrain was we wanted to put this, like, I believe 23-inch diameter circle on our belly pan, right? So, there wasn't really a lot of room for, like, electronics or, like, an actual drivetrain, which is part of why we put our transmissions in the back. As you can see, there wasn't, if you can imagine the holes being like the outermost of the serializer, there wasn't room for a transmission in the middle. You probably could have put an axle there, but you can only fit 1 line of chain in the tube, right? The chain is inside the tube, for those of you that, yeah. We had a battery box in the back. We actually had to cut the back tube, if you can see. See how there's a tube that goes along the back of the robot? We didn't put the battery pretty much inside that tube because there was also no room because we put a 23-inch diameter circle on our robot. And then you can see the chain tensioner there. If you go to the next slide. No, not yet. That's okay. So transmission. So it was single-speed transmission. It was really simple, actually. And a fun story is we started with this at the San Francisco Regional. You can see everything is held in with shoulder bolts, which is essentially when you just bolt the center. Yeah, it's shoulder. Yeah, okay. Basically, there wasn't anything capturing the other side of the shoulder bolt, and we had students assembling the transmission that forgot to use Loctite. And so what happened at San Francisco Regional is before our first, second finals match, in the finals, our driver manipulator was moving the robot to line up for Auton, and she said that the transmission felt crunchy. So we looked at the robot, and the gear of our transmission was falling off because someone hadn't Loctite in the shoulder bolt. So we actually took ourselves out and repaired it during the second match, which for those of you who are at SF, for those of you that are at SF, we did repair a transmission before the 3rd match, so we were ready to go, but as you know, we didn't have to play. So that was incredibly exciting. But anyhow, what happened is we really believe in this sort of constant iteration even between regionals and 4 champs and stuff like that. And so for SVR, we redesigned our transmission. We added a if you can see the plate's transparent on the other side, but we basically added a capture plate to the other side of it, and we also changed actually the gear reductions. Yeah, so we basically redid our transmission, but it's still a single speed, like pretty simple. Like if you guys know gearboxes, you know, just motors to anyhow. Oh, so the chain tensioner was another cool part of the robot. We use a lot of chain tensioners like that. So if you guys went to Travis's talk earlier, he talks about design for controllability, and a lot of that is having nicely tensioned chain, so then you don't have that backlash for your sensors, basically. And so you guys can understand this. So sprocket is obviously not intersecting the chain, right? The chain, this is at its least tension state, the sprocket is modeled in the most tension state. So if you imagine so this is a nut, right? So there's a bolt going through it. And so you can loosen that, right? And then this, you tighten, and it pushes down on the standoff, which will push the sprocket into the chain, if you can imagine that, because this is in a slot. Does that make sense? And so then once you push it down, you tighten the nut and the bolt, and to basically, you have like this squeezing force on it, and it basically grips itself there along the slot, and that's how we tension things. We have a lot of tensioners like that on our robot. So I really like that because it's simple, and we can manufacture that in-house also, which is really nice. Yes, what's up?
Does that mean that you, like, when you're designing things, you don't need to worry as much about like this between the wheels and stuff?
So what we do is we design things so that in its least tension state, it's fine, and then we do like plus or minus. So like for chain, we do plus or minus a chain link. So we figure out the Snaider distance, and then we, smart dimension, path dimension in SolidWorks. So we do a path dimension to basically a close factor of a chain length. So like for 25 chain, it would be 0.25, right? And then we make sure that the tension is like plus or minus an entire chain link. That's just how we generally do it. So we still model chain length to, make sure it's all good. But it's not like a driving dimension. We just move things around until it's like really close to a certain number of chain links. Yes.
Can you explain the tensioner again?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you imagine chain going from one sprocket to another, right? Can I draw? Yeah, I can. So you imagine, so here's one sprocket, right? Here's another, right? And at its most basic point, there's chain going around them, right? So what will happen is if you spin this way, this will spin, and then you'll be able to spin this one also, right? And so what happens is if you can imagine pushing down on the chain so that the chain is now like this, right? See how now see how it's going to be more tension now? It's going to be a little tighter because you're still using the same amount of chain, you're just pulling it taut, right? Like if you imagine an elastic hairband, you're pulling it tighter, right? So see how the path is on. Like if you have a hairband between two things and you squeeze it, it's going to be tighter, right? So that's what we call like tension. And so the idea is this sprocket here is pushing down on the chain. So this line is chain, if you can imagine it, that we've modeled. And so the idea is you use this screw, and can you imagine when you tighten this screw, this is going to come down and go up, right?
So you use a third sprocket?
Yes, we do. So we have a third sprocket here, as it's called like an idler sprocket, because it's not actively driving anything, but it's redirecting the path of the chain. So we have a third one here, like that. And it's just on a bearing, it's not driven, it's just hanging out. Yeah.
Okay. So drivetrain controls. So basically we use an encoder and a gyro, or actually multiple encoders and one gyro. Encoders go on each side, we put them in the output shaft, just to...
What's a gyro?
Gyro, it just measures... Yeah, it measures a lot of things. We use the IMU, which has a gyro. And then the gyro is basically measuring the angle that the robot is pointing at, as well as how fast it's moving in a circle. So the angular velocity and then the orientation of the robot. So we use the encoders on each side of the drivetrain plus a gyro. And we use, in the code, we have what it is like sensor fusion. So we have like really interesting controls that Austin is actually talking about right now on the other room. Where basically combine those two, plus we have some knowledge of physics of what's going to happen when we apply some voltage. And so at the end of the day, we figure out, okay, if we put this voltage, then this is going to happen. And then we iterate that over like, I don't know, every 5 milliseconds, and so we end up having, let's say, a goal. And so we are able to, using all of that, we're able to get our robot to move to wherever we want it to.
So this is our hangar, which is located on our intake. So, okay. So, this is our hanger here. And essentially this Velcro spins and it catches the rope, right? You guys have all seen the Velcro roller design. So we frayed the end of a rope and it catches there. So the part that is, I guess, fun about our hanger is if you notice, I can spin it this way, but if I try really hard, I can't spin it the other way, right? So many of you guys use like ratchets on your systems. So we have a bit of a chopped off ratchet there from like, it's just like a socket, like a ratcheting wrench. And part of the challenge was, if you can imagine, the intake is always going to be spinning throughout the match, right? Like the intake is spinning in, it's spinning out, and it's driven off of the motors that we have that are driving the intake you see on both sides. So part of the challenge was, it'll be like when we're spinning the intake in, it's fine, you know, the gearing will go to the hanger, but when we're spinning the intake the other direction, it's going to spin against the ratchet, which won't allow it to spin, right? So what we did is we used another ratchet, where, or like a one-way bearing. You can buy those off McMaster, bearings that only let you spin in one direction. And essentially, it meant that we could only, so I believe this was the one-way bearing, might be that one, but essentially it would only engage this shaft, or this gear if it was spinning in like a certain direction, right? So that way we didn't drive against the ratchet. So that was fun. And then we added more reductions here to get more torque for the climber. And then this is just a guard because the rope got caught in the gearbox once, and then the gear's like, so that was fun.
Question.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you just be running against the one-way bearing? How does that work?
The one-way bearing is going in the one-way bearing is not really a ratchet, it just like only engages in one direction. So if you can imagine sort of like, this is like not at all how it works. This is like a crude picture, but it helps you conceptualize. As like if you have like these like teeth like this, right? And then you have like this like circle maybe, like, you know, circles like this. When you're spinning this way, see how all the teeth are going to catch on the circles and engage it? But then when you spin it the other way, they're not going to catch on anything, right? And so the idea is you're only spinning the hanger gearbox one direction. You're never spinning it against the ratchet, right? If it were a direct connection, like with mesh, like spur gears and stuff, then you would always be spinning things. You only want to spin one direction. So prototyping the hanger. This is sort of about prototyping process and how it's like often really silly. Around here, people like sort of go crazy. So it was like insight into our hanger, just like for fun, I guess. I don't know. People initially came up with a design like this, where this was bizarre. Essentially spokes that would spin and catch the rope, and it would spin really fast. And then here are like, you know, more refined version of this, you know, prototype. You know, got like really refined. It was awesome. So it obviously didn't make any sense. And this was like also like an element where we had like these two wheels in different directions. That if you can see, like that's a wheel and that's a wheel. That didn't make any sense. It didn't really work. And then someone was like, hey, LOL, like here's some Velcro I'm gonna wrap on a PVC pipe. Oh wait, it works. So, but I mean that's like all part of the process, right? Because maybe one of these two crazy out there ideas worked really well, maybe it didn't. Yeah. And then there's a fun picture of when our rope got caught on like nothing, but we still hung. If you look at that far picture, so that was cool. But you know, things don't work perfectly. That's okay. All right. And then intake prototyping. So we prototyped a bunch of different random styles of intaking also. So you can see, so I don't know if any of you guys, did any of you guys have intakes for balls of this year in your robot? Sort of. It was hard.
It's not that it worked.
Yeah, it was hard. There was like this, oh, something in my eye. So in 2016, balls were squishy, right? Okay, balls were squishy, right? So it's fine if you're like off by like an inch or two, or if there's like dead space, you can just sort of like squeeze it through that dead space and it'd be fine. But these balls don't really squish, right? So it's like you're either contacting it, like you're either not, you're contacting it, or you're like really like destroying balls, right? So it's hard to like find like an in-between. So it's a little hard to tell here, but we had an over-the-bumper design basically, where we have these like rubber rollers that were like a little tougher, and there's just like this dead space. Like if you can imagine, you know, bumpers and then like a ground like that. You know, you have a roller here and you have a roller here, your ball's fine, you know, your ball's fine here. But then you have like this zone here where your ball's just not touching anything. And we really believe in like a touch it, own it type strategy where you should always be actively controlling your game pieces. You shouldn't just have game pieces like sitting in your robot. Like you should always be in some sort of active control where you have some mechanism. That was like something we really struggled with. So then we actually experimented with this like, oh, another thing we thought would be a problem is like getting balls into your hopper. Like we thought like, you know, oh, here's a question, can we shove balls in from the bottom or do we need to like funnel them up somehow? So then we tried this like flinging method where we would intake balls really fast and they'd shoot up into like literally mid-air, like just hanging out here, and then they would like hit that and then funnel over into a bucket, which like we didn't really like because then you don't have active control over your game pieces when they're flying in the air, right? I mean, like it worked okay, but like, it was just like a little silly, right? So we also tried vectored intake wheels, which like they worked actually surprisingly okay, but then the little like parts would like get in the wiffle ball, and then you have like these weird jams. And then we actually tried like these random foam rollers that worked okay. And you want to go to the next slide? Yes, what's up?
Just wondering, didn't the game rules this year say that you weren't allowed to have any part of the robot outside this specific zone?
Yes, you have to start with your robot inside of your frame perimeter, but you can extend outside. So our frame perimeter was just smaller than that box. So if you imagine a box that was like your robot has to be this big, right? Our bumper was just smaller than that. And then our robot started inside, and then when the match started, we extended over our bumper, but we're still within the volume. Yeah.
Wait, were you allowed to extend like up to your bumper in starting configuration? Because like I can see the little flap just over the bumper, or it's like right to the edge of the bumper.
Which flap? Oh, this one?
The flap at the edge of the hopper.
This?
Yeah.
Oh, this starts like that or something. Yeah, I forget.
Oh.
Oh, well, when the intake is in, it sort of catches on that.
Okay.
And so when we start, this was because when you are when you go to the hopper during auto to get balls, there's a gap between because of the bumper.
Yeah.
Like if you imagine like me being a hopper and this is in here, there's like a gap, right? So then balls were like falling here, and we couldn't get as many balls in, and so we were shooting less. So then essentially what it does at the start of Auton is this is in, and then it like captures it somehow, and then it extends out and basically comes out. So yeah, it did start inside. What were we talking about? Right, that dead space. So we did some fun stuff this year with bumper technology. So we found this abrasion-resistant natural rubber on McMaster. Well, the process started actually with these stencils, and then Emerson, who's pictured there, mixed together all these chemicals and like made this paste, and then we like put it over the stencil, and then it dried, and then we took the stencil off, and then it was really messy, but it worked really well because it was sticky and grippy, so it actually stuck against the balls. So then we found this stuff from McMaster that we actually cut with scissors. It was like this rubber thing. So later, if you want to come up and feel our bumpers, it's actually rubber letters, and that's sort of why we have this silly 971 first, 971. Yeah, what's up?
How much did all that working with the bumper technology cost you?
I don't know.
I don't have any specific.
We bought these like sheets of rubber from McMaster, which I don't think were terribly expensive. I think it was more of like a human resource. Like we had like a bunch of people working on like different bumpering numbers for like actually a while. But we also have a problem with like getting new members involved. So like it worked out well. But if you guys were wondering why we have like this silliness in the front of our robot, that's why.
It's like, we also content for everything. So usually we have like the 7, which is just.
Oh yeah, that too.
And then
so,
we added like.
Our 7, like, no, seriously, we tested it. We like prototyped a whole one, right? We let it dry overnight and everything, and then we were like, oh man, like that's dead space. And then we like added that to our 7. But anyhow, we did the same thing with our rollers. So if you go back, our rollers, we also did a bunch of experimentation with rollers. So we went through like 4 or 5 different versions of our rollers. So we started with foam on the bottom, right? And so we adhered them to PVC pipes. And then we painted over the foam with this like weird like gunky, I don't know, Emerson did this too. And eventually that was like, it just looks gross, like doesn't look good, it's, you know, it all falls off. So then we found this silicone tape that we would wrap around. And you guys know silicone, it's like really, you know, grippy and rubbery. So then we wrapped the silicone tape around the roller. And that worked okay. We had that I think at SFR and SBR. We went with the silicone silicone. But then we kept replacing them because they would sort of get all, like the foam would freak out and then the end of the silicone tape would like start unraveling. So then for champs, we used similar type rubber to the type that is on our numbers and basically stretched over to aluminum tube. So that works pretty well. You can feel them. They're not very compressible, but the bumper is the nice rubber.
Yeah, I think something you're going to hear about throughout the presentation is these walls were like really annoying, like for everything, like intaking, shooting, serializing, like everything was like really annoying because of like the structure of the walls, those holes in there, like.
Yeah, like the diameter from like a hole to a hole is different from like a non-hole to a non-hole. So like it's just. And then the intake extension was also interesting. We didn't want something that we couldn't have something that could pivot, which is the easiest and best. That's how you should make intakes. Because we wanted to put a gear mechanism on it. So obviously you intake the gear mechanism. So we have it sliding in and out. This is also sort of one of those things that's a little hard to visualize, but this screenshot sort of helps. So if you can, this is chain once again. This is how we model chain. So this is fixed here on this tube. This is attached, right? And this motor, I believe, is driven. These are just idlers, so they're directing the chain, but they're not actually powered. So I believe this one is powered, and what happens when this spins this way, or this way, imagine it spinning this way, you know, the chain is going to move down. Does that make sense? Just take a few seconds and look at it. This one is spinning the chain, and the chain is attached all the way back here also. You see that? You see how this is spinning this way? The chain is, you know, you get more, and then this is like, you know, this end of the chain continues to move down. But it's attached to that arm, right? Yes?
Like spool on your end?
No, it's attached with, it's hard to explain. We basically, we go through the chain. Like if this is chain sort of like that, you just have like, you know, it goes through it like that. On the other end, this is like bolted to like some block or something-ish. Yeah. And then you can, so that was like a tube inside a tube also, which is really tricky. So if you can look, if you're looking directly into the tube, you can see this is a bearing, that's a bearing, that's a bearing, that's another small bearing. So we have 4 bearings that basically slid along the wall of the inside of the tube. And then you can see another version of our chain tensioner, right? We have a lot of those all around the robot. Yes?
How does spinning that sprocket help lower the, like, push the intake out?
So you can imagine, so this is attached to that, right? Yeah. So you can imagine if we can get this part of the chain to move down, then we can move the whole arm down, right? Like working backwards, I guess.
What?
Anyway, let's try this.
So it's flexible.
Okay. So let's trace the path, right? So we want this to go this way, and then that's going to go that way. This is going to go this way, right? Like that. So if you imagine this is driving it, right? So this is going to spin. So this is going to spin the chain, right? And then the chain's going to move this way, right? So it's going to get loosened. And then when this is here and you have all this slack, it's just going to fall down, right? Like it will float or something. Do you get the impression?
You can also think about it as the chain being anchored on the other side of the tube as well, so it's also pulling.
Yeah. If you imagine it pulling, we can try that too. So imagine this spinning this way, right? So when this spins this way, this is going to spin that way, and spin that way, right? So see how it's going to pull it up? Does that make sense?
Want to pull it down though, because it's like the chain is getting like closer to the sprocket. So
well, it'll pull it this direction, right? So if you imagine like the chain is actually attached out here, so it's pulling it this way, right? So then this is going to want to move in this direction, right? You see that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's just linear sync. It's sort of probably could have used a rack and pinion, honestly. It was like really complicated. Whatever.
Yeah, that seems totally obvious now that you just said it.
A rack and pinion?
Yeah.
That was like, we're sort of like, oh. what's up?
Does the actual
Yes.
does that beam like go into another beam?
Yeah, it goes into, so you have one tube and then like it just goes inside. So that's what this picture sort of is you have like one tube on the outside, like that, and then the other tube is on the inside, and then attached to this tube we have a bearing, a bearing, a bearing, and a bearing, and then this.
So intake and hybrid controls are not particularly interesting, but it's pretty much very similar to like how we control the rest of the robot. Basically, we have a couple encoders, or one encoder and then a potentiometer, so a couple sensors, and then we use a state space controller to, control the actual intake in and intake out. So yeah, it's pretty much like the drivetrain in this case. Yeah.
Okay, so gear mechanism. Gears are sort of like a mini motor teams, because we like didn't really even have a gear mechanism. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question that's like not related. How did you end up fixing the dead space in between your bumper and the
We made sticky bumpers. So then instead of like slipping around in that area, the ball could sort of just be sucked in and roll up against the bumper. Yeah. So, whatever, I'll just expose ourselves, I guess. We didn't have a gear mechanism in CAD when we bagged our robot. We put it in a bag and we were like, okay, let's start designing a gear mechanism. So I don't know if you guys were at San Francisco with us or not, but like, we were really that good at gears in San Francisco. That's a horrible choice to make. Horrible. I encourage all teams, unless you're sure that you have the resources to design a gear mechanism later. For us, it was like, balls are really hard. That's going to be a lot harder than gears. So let's spend all of our resources doing that. And then we built around a gear mechanism, right? Like with our linear extension, we knew we were going to put a gear there. We just didn't start the design until later because we thought we're sure we knew we had the resources, I guess. Did you have a question? No. Okay. I don't encourage that. That's terrible, but it's just sort of funny. So this is some of the prototyping that we did. I mean, essentially the prototyping was answering the question of, what do we need to pick up a gear and like, does it have to be actuated? And the answer was like, no, it doesn't really have to be actuated. Like you can't have a human player pull it up. And then once we had that part figured out, we felt okay sort of moving on. So you can see we made some pretty rough prototypes. Got new members engaged.
Yeah, I mean, this was our first prototype. And you can see we actually did something like a servo thing where it goes down, but then we decided that maybe it was going to be hard to put it in the robot since we didn't cut it until like later on.
Yeah,
so we got to this, which was a completely passive mech, except that it was on the intake, so you could just move it out and in, and then,
with the intake fully extended, the peg also doesn't like go into the gear. So we with the funnel completely we thought the funnel would be enough to get the peg into the gear, but it was sort of iffy. So our human player actually had to hold the peg up a little in order to pick up our gear.
That even allowed?
Yeah, absolutely. He got really good at it. Yep, that was fun. We're gonna go to the next slide. So we went through 3 full iterations of our gear mechanism. For every competition, we walked in with another gear mech. And you can see it's just like this plastic thing. It was really funny. Go to the next slide for a second. So it was like walking into a competition with another gear mechanism. And a hopper like this thing. So we just anyhow, so we go back on. So this was passive. You can see it had that funnel at the bottom, which we didn't really use. We just had our human player with it. It worked okay. We did maybe 3 years. And if you go to the next one, you can see here we added more of a funnel for the left and the right also, because the robot wouldn't always perfectly line up. And then this is us with our carrying allowance. If you go to the next one, for champs, we added a servo. So something we didn't have on our robot this year were pneumatics. And pneumatics are really easy. So especially for code and just in general, because it's like binary, right? It's either extended or it's not extended. There's some pneumatics have like a halfway. So we didn't have pneumatics, which means we didn't have, like, we didn't have any, I forgot what pneumatics. All those things you need for solenoids, right? So we didn't have any of that on our robot. So we had a servo, which is basically like a small iron. So whatever, Adam can talk about it. And this part comes, like, opens, which let us pick up the gear faster. And then these fingers are actually funny. The gear was going like this, like you pick up the gear and it's like, you know. So then we put those there, and then it's like, well, how does the peg come out? It's like that. So that was cool. Also, that solved the problem. Go ahead. Oh, do you want to talk about the servos?
We need to talk about servos.
30-second lesson on servos? No.
Maybe 15 seconds.
15 seconds, go.
15 seconds, go.
Servos, basically like motors, but not really, because you don't apply a voltage per se, just like that. Instead, you just say, okay, I want the servo to go to this angle, and it goes there. That's it.
Okay, shooter prototyping. So we went through a lot of different prototypes for our shooter also. You can see we go through different stages where in the beginning we just sort of like throw things together to figure out if a ball will even be powered by a wheel, right? Like maybe you put it through one, like maybe wheels don't, I don't know, right? The idea is, oh, okay, you can get how, you can shoot a ball with a wheel. And then if you look here, those are, on the far side, we tried single wheel and double wheel as our eventual 2 prototypes, which we did like more rigorous testing on. And those were actually cut out of wood on our router, and the ball path, someone did the math for like good ball path. And then we cut it to basically have like a more accurate representation of what would actually be in the robot.
Before we tried this, we actually tried pool noodles.
No, that's in the next slide.
Damn it.
So for real prototyping, we were like, oh, these wheels are so, like these stupid balls are so inconsistent. So we just like tried a bunch of stuff. We put 2 pool noodles on our shooter, and like it worked really well. Like we had really high accuracy. The way we test these things is we figure out a pretty good place, like in terms of like velocity and angle and blah 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 blah. And then we shoot like 50 balls, and it's like how many of those 50 balls make it in. And it's like one by one, right? You put one in, you put the next one in, and it just means like consistency over different types of balls and different angle, whatever. So pool noodles did really well. But then we were like, oh, like not about to change pool noodles every match during competition, right? Because pool noodles aren't really sustainable. They're gonna break and they're gonna be annoying. So then we were like, okay, what if we sprayed the pool noodle with like some rubberizing stuff? So then we sprayed it with that, and then it pretty much like made it, like it didn't work anymore, because that was sad. And then we tried like turning the inside of a rubber wheel to be the diameter of the wheel. Not like, it didn't really work. And then we found these yellow wheels, which worked pretty well, and they, we wouldn't have to replace one every match. They held up pretty well. So that's what we went with. And then just in general, our shooter has a hood. Here also you can see, the gear, it's a rack and pinion, but like a curved rack. And then you just have a single flywheel here. Yeah.
Is that a professional photo shoot?
So we have this mentor named Steve, who is an amazing photographer, and he has, it's just a white poster board that he keeps in his lab in a bag that's like for Steve only. And then he just like, when we assemble mechanism, he'll like pull out his poster and like take a pic. He's awesome. Like all these pictures you see wouldn't happen without Steve.
Yeah, thanks Steve for putting all the
like all these
workshop.
cameras you see. Oh my god.
Please thank Steve. He is so nice.
There's this joke that Megan and I make where if we were like, hey Steve, like can we get a shot of like the back of the moon for our chairman's video? He'd be like, okay. He's insane. Okay, anyhow.
So shooter controls. This was actually pretty interesting. So we started using a different type of controller because.
Why'd you need a different one?
Yeah, the reason why is there are a lot of balls. We need to shoot them fast, and we can just like say, you know what, let's just do our best and let's just go with it, because they were like insanely inaccurate. Like at the beginning, if you try to shoot like 10 balls a second, it doesn't work. Like maybe you're gonna make 2 of them. So we needed to have a better strategy. So we, for the first time, like we included like a hybrid common filter with our state space control, which basically accounts for like some variance in time and things like that. It's a pretty interesting macro which allowed us to get a much better accuracy in like our shooting. Don't have exact numbers, but at least like 70% more accurate.
How did it make it work?
Hmm?
It wasn't like wheel speed. It was on the speed of the yellow wheel there.
Yeah, it's controlling. So this is controlling the speed of the yellow wheel.
Okay, serializer. So, oh boy. So this is just a funny story. Mechanical people call it a serializer, and in code it's called an indexer. If you look at all the code, because it's easier to spell. So we went through a few different designs. So if you look in that, so if any of you guys ever been like paintballing, so you know how those things shoot paintballs so fast, you go boom, and they all come out. So then we were like, okay, like same, but like for fuel, you know. The essential idea of it is, here I'll draw it, it'll make more sense. So you basically take this, and then you have this center column, and then you sort of have like some hook, and then like maybe some here. The idea is you have balls, right? And then as this spins, see how it's hooking the balls in? Does that make sense? So that was the central idea, basically, is you have these rotating things that basically suck the balls in really fast. And the idea is if you spin the inside and the outside at opposite directions, you can go extra fast, but that was totally unnecessary. And I don't know if you guys know Team 125, also had a similar version of this, but they didn't spin their outside cage, so they didn't need to spin a 23-inch diameter circle. They just had the middle spin, which was like totally, it says totally the right, like, you know, train stop to get off on. Like, people like got on that die rotor train, they got off on the right stop, and I just like, anyhow, but it was fun. It created a lot of interesting design challenges. So for the first time this year, we prototyped with a ton of wood. I don't know, it was a funny story where I think Zach was like, why aren't you guys cutting wood on your router? And then one of our mentors was like, someone was like, oh, can't you cut wood? And they were like, oh, we can cut wood.
They were trying to do everything in like polycarb or like aluminum that they had lying around. Like, can't you guys cut wood?
That was like a huge moment of like, oh my god, we can cut wood. So then we cut like a bunch of wood. We grew our prototyping budget, I think, by like 500% this year. So that was cool. Just buying sheets of wood. So you can see why. And in our first version, we have these little pockets, which are modeled after the serializer. And that didn't really work. Balls had a hard time falling in. And then we had this, where with these little like finger flaps. That worked okay, but like you can imagine, sort of like when the ball gets here, there's like a dead, like it's like, you know, like balls get jammed, like they crushed a bunch of balls, right? Because you have that weird dead space. So then we tried getting rid of the hook, and if you look at iteration number 3, we just had these 2 rollers, if that makes sense. If you can imagine the rollers spinning around, so instead of a hook, you just have like a roller like this hanging out, and it scoops them up, right? And then this roller here follows. And okay, we're still good on time. So yeah, and then the rollers worked really well at sucking the balls up, but it wasn't as fast as the hook. So then we combined the hook and the roller for a hook-roller combination. Yeah.
Serializer prototyping was pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that's interesting about spinning them the opposite way is we tested it with like slow motion on our phone. Found out we were feeding almost 40 balls a second, and they'd shoot like 8 feet straight up in the air. But when we actually connected all the pieces together, that was totally uncontrollable, and like 2 out of 40 would go into the hoop.
Yeah.
So it all had to be tuned down into less than half that.
They would all like hit each other in the air because they would
Yeah.
slow down and like.
They would slipstream into each other and push them out of the way.
We were like, oh my god, let's like, you know, people are gonna spin the inside at like speed X, but it's like, oh my god, if we spin the outside at speed X, we could be 2X, right? Like, oh my god, we're gonna be so much faster. But it's like, it was like physics like made it impossible to even go that fast. Whatever.
Physics. But it was pretty interesting. So we had like a lot of iterations like, around it, apart from like just the serializer itself, because bolts were getting stuck everywhere. Like it was getting like
Literally
super messy. Like yeah, and so it took us a long time. Like it wasn't until like like week 4 or something that we just kept prototyping like things, just because it still didn't work. It kept getting stuck or it kept not working right. So that was pretty interesting.
So this is another thing. We originally had these 3 tubes going up, but it was too wobbly, and you know the shooter was on top of it, right? So if the shooter's wobbly, all of our code will complain about the fact that it's like not consistent enough. So then we actually made this solid aluminum tube, as you can see. And another thing is, you see how there's a motor here spinning this? And it's like, oh, where's the motor? And it's like inside the motor. So it's like inverted inside.
Great use of space.
Huh?
Great use of space.
Yeah, because things were getting jammed, so we were like, all right, let's get rid of the motor. Put it inside. And then here's the top view. You can sort of see this is the hook, right? And then these are all the fingers that it's pushing against, and it comes up the center column. There's a C theme.
Yeah, seriously.
The dolphin tail. Oh, the dolphin tail. So normally the serializer runs this way, right? And so what we do is we run the serializer in the opposite direction, and the dolphin tail scoops up balls. So when we have jams, we run it the other direction, and it scoops all the balls up and about. So it's meant to get rid of jams, basically.
Or mention like, how else to go back in case we do that.
Yeah, it also lets you run the serializer backwards in general, because otherwise the hook would be running into balls, right? Turret! So this is like another example of super extraness. So we were like, okay, we need a turret, right? So normally when you have a turret, you have to like ground it to something. So you basically have something spin against it, right? So we had this tube out here that we use. It's really great for mounting radios. It was actually meant for the turret. And then it was getting in the way of balls falling into the serializer. You can imagine like a huge, bar going across. So then Travis was like, let's just get rid of it. But then it's like, oh, how do you ground a turret, right? Like you need to hold it against something else for it to spin. So then we actually created this like counter-rotating turret that would like spin against itself. It's really hard to visualize. Okay.
I mean, it's just...
basically like, if you imagine the bottom spinning, it spins like this, right? You see that? So see how the shooter's spinning? Right? Because when the serializer spins, the shooter's moving, right? You see it? But then the idea is this gearbox here spins against that. So when the serializer moves, this is like, haha, not today. It spins like that, right? So it like, that was really fun. We designed our own gears, actually, our gear profile, because we wanted to machine it in-house. Travis was like, let's get this done tomorrow. So then I was like, oh god. So then we like designed the gear because we were able to cut it on our router. Because normally when you cut things on a router, do you guys know how routers work? So you basically take like a spinny thing and you spin it really fast, and then it like cuts material. So they basically have like diameter. So like if you wanted to cut this, it like wouldn't be possible because your spinny thing is not going to be able to spin all the way in, right? And you guys have seen gears. Gears are like this. So it's like, how the heck are you going to get a spinning thing in those? So then we created our own that was like this, our gear. And then you can see, so that was fun. It was also really fun code because it's like, well, how fast do you spin it to keep it straight, right?
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, for the state space control that we use, basically we include the physics into it. So that's part of what we do. And so if you have a turret that is spinning against the serializer, because this module that is spinning this gear is connected to the serializer. So whenever you spin a turret, then there's a force, there's a torque in the serializer as well. So you need to account for that. So we had like this really intricate system where you just had to account for all that. It was pretty interesting math. Again, you can ask me more about it later, like after the presentation, or you can also ask us in this room. But yeah, we use Hall effect sensors to like zero it, and then the encoder just to keep the position after we zero the turret. And that's pretty much it.
Is that the last slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any questions about anything?
I have a comment to make, and it's that a lot of times my mentors will bring up certain design ideas with me, and I'm like, oh my god, how'd you come up with that? Like, how did you come up with that? Like, who came up with that? Like, wow, like that's, like the chain tensioner, for example. Like, that's, like, I love that, it's ingenious. We can machine them in-house, it's, you know, it's great, it's simple. We have chain tensioners, like, on the intake, on the serializer, on the bottom, and the shooter, like, they're everywhere, right? They're a great design. And Travis always says to me, like, it's not about coming up with them yourself, it's about, like, looking at a lot of robots, right? So now that you've seen that, oh, you can, you know, have some sort of linear extension like this, they're like, oh, you can, you know, this is possible. Like, you might look at the chain tensioner and be like, oh, wow, that's such a clever design. And the idea is you implement them yourselves, right? People aren't out here, like, coming up with, like, chain tensioners themselves. Like, this is something that someone saw. Like, someone came up with it first, of course, and, like, they're probably, like, a genius. But, like, the idea is, so, like, something I personally really enjoy is going around and looking at other teams' robots, right? Even, you know, at competitions, like, go look at, you know, always come look at our robot, like, go look at 254's robot, like, they have a lot of simple solutions to things. that are good. And, like, the more you see, the more you sort of know and are aware of, right? And the idea is eventually, after, you know, many years, you get this point where you can start to take all these different things you've seen and know and put them together, right? So, like, when you look at a robot like this, someone didn't sit there and, like, come up with all of it out of thin air, right? Like, flywheels have been around for a long time. Like, a flywheel is not, like, a new concept, right? Like, drivetrains are not new concepts. And it's just, like, we have mentors that have been doing FRC that are, like, 28 years old, and they started when they were freshmen, right? So it's been, like, over 10 years for them doing FRC, and they've seen a lot of FRC robots. So hopefully you can be inspired by some of these designs.
You can imagine it. It's like when you're in school and, like, they give you math problems, and they are all, like, the same. They all seem the same, you know. That's so decent. Like, the more you do something, the more, like, you actually learn how to solve newer problems that are going to come out later on. So it's kind of like similar to that. You look at robots and their design, so are able to figure out how to combine all those things to get something new.
Your time is up in like 7 months, so. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's interesting.
Yeah, what's that? Why did you make like 5 robots?
Versions you mean, or like multiples?
Multiple robots.
So we only make 2.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Pretty including the sound.
During the season we make 2. And that's so we practice code on the other one. And we can do drive practice and stuff.
And who makes like a ton? Like 1 year, someone made like 30 or more.
Some teams make 3. I think 254 tried to make 3 this year, but they like didn't have the resources, and like one of them was basically just like garbage anyhow. I think 1678 makes 3 pretty successfully, and the idea is one goes in the bag, one goes for drive practice, and the other one goes for coding and tuning enhancements, if that makes sense. So then we can all actively be working on things. But like, I don't think we could have managed that. That's too much. We don't have room for 3 robots. I don't know what we would do with that many robots.
I think, yeah, we literally don't have room for 3 robots.
Yeah.
Actively, like in the lab.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any space. Also not having time. So, but I think 2 robots works pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, like bag one and then keep working on the other one.
Another thing we do is we don't know which robot is going to be the competition robot or the practice bot until an hour before bag. That's not something we decide until the very end, because you want both to be mechanically the same. Because what will happen is you'll have 4 pulleys and 2 of them are meh, and then one of them is, 2 of them are pretty good, and people are like, oh, that's okay, just use the bad one with the practice robot. Like, that's how the culture, then they're going to be different, right? So we want to build 2 high-quality, mechanically identical robots. So we don't actually decide until the very end. I think this year we labeled one of them A and one of them B, and everyone was like, oh, the A robot's going to be the comp robot, we're going to bag that one, let's work really hard on A. And like, pretty sure we bagged B, like I don't even remember, but like everybody works equally hard on both.
About building 2 robots, we tried it this year, but we ended up having one being built first and the second one being built kind of after.
Yeah.
But then, like, how do you handle that? Do you build,
So
like,
we
move
build
everything
both at the same time. So we have different people, yeah, just build them at the same time. You assemble one and then you assemble the other. So, another thing is the same person will assemble it on both robots for consistency, typically. For the more complicated, so like for the intake, the same person assembled it on both robots, right? And for the shooter, when you assemble one shooter, you assemble the other shooter, right? At the same time. You might have like a few different hands on it, but like, you know, you're putting them together. So. Yeah, I mean, it's 5:30, so that is all.
We are 971.